Tom, look, I really appreciate that, and I'm sorry that we need to scrunch it up, but are you willing to take questions out in the hall? Look, anybody who's got a detailed question, General Spohr will take you out back at one of the tables and maybe give you a more fulsome answer to your problem. I know there was a question about BRAC that was mentioned. You might want to ask him about it. Thanks a lot. That's very sobering. It's a lot of money over a long period of time. Your first uptick was when? When do you see it's not going to end until, who knows when it's going to end, but 2018, 2019, new administration, maybe. My view is that at some point somebody's going to have to start talking about something other than deficit reduction. There has to be a vision of the future, because if you just keep going the way you're going, okay, got it, deficit reduction, but there is a future, and the enemy gets a vote. Don't forget that. Okay, Grace. Ms. Grace, Dr. Grace Bohanec, Chief Technology Officer of the United States Army Materiel Command, will give us her thought on the state of play. On the future. The future. Speaking of the future.
Speaking of the future. Yeah, it's a sobering, realistic day today, and hopefully I can echo on some messages that have already been spoken about for the majority of the day, and discuss with you the impacts of where we're seeing S&T and the future of that. So if we go to my first slide, and before I launch this, it's a short little video, and when you see this video, there's a lot of appreciation in this video of how industry has helped support the United States Army, and in particular, how you've helped us in generating new capabilities and technologies over the past 12 years. So if we could play the video. Do we have any sound? Videos are always tricky, even when you're a chief technology officer. Sometimes they don't work. Any chance on the video? If not, play it without the sound. There'll be many people who worked this weekend who'll be disappointed if there was no sound. So we did a lot, and I can say we did a lot coming from the technical community, but we did that in partnership with industry to bring some tremendous capability over the past 11, 12 years. And the question is, where do we go from here? So I thought I would spend, if we go to the next slide, I thought I would just give you a couple little trivia. And I always found it interesting when speakers get up and they talk a little bit about the past and give you some thoughts. And one of the things is, all of us know about the internet, and that it was first developed in the 60s, and it was developed as part of a DARPA program. But what's really interesting, I find, is the internet is now the fastest growing communication tool in the history. It took the radio broadcasters about 38 years to reach an audience of 50 million. Television, it took 13 years, and it took the internet just 4. And just think of what the social media, how quick that has moved forward. And if you look at photovoltaics and the movement of us to get off our dependency of energy, the first photovoltaic cell was developed by a physicist, Mr. Berkel, at age 19, experimenting in his father's laboratory. And I say that, in his father's laboratory. And what are we doing today? So today at White Sands, we have one of the largest solar power systems to date being put on a military installation. You can see that across in organizations like Twelly Army Depot, where now we are putting these kind of systems that are allowing us to reduce our energy supplies on these bases. In fact, we'll supply almost 30% of some of the operations. So those kind of technology things are moving, and they're moving fairly quickly. And then if you think about, things like, what happened on this day, so many years ago. Well, on this day, John Glenn became the first American to orbit Earth in 1962. We had a pilot, Edward O'Hare, who was the first American in World War II flying ace in 1942. And which I find really interesting is this one, and don't ask me why we discovered this, but Congress prohibited dueling in Washington, D.C. in 1839. Good thing, right? That's right. So let me move on and let me tell you a little bit about what I see as the future. And next slide, please. Oh, back up one. We all talked about this, and I don't need to say anything more except that we're in some challenging times. And I can say from my own experience that we are spending a lot of time really, really trying to concentrate on what we do best. How do we do it? How do we accelerate technology? How do we make sure that we are always keeping our eye on what's changing in terms of threat, and how does that impact our investment strategies? And most importantly is, how do we modernize over time? What's our process to modernize over time? And how do we make sure that we insert this technology and the technology investments we make more easily into programs of record? Next slide. So what have we done? Many of you know me from my days in Warren as the director of the Tank and Automotive R&D Center, and a great organization that stands really strong. I know Dr. Paul Rogers is here today. And I'm now in headquarters AMC, and the way I like to look at it is, AMC and its enterprise of the R&D community has invested in really looking at how do we bring the planning, the synchronization, investment strategies into the mainstream part of the institutional Army within AMC, and then across with TRADOC and ASALT. So when you talk about things that we're doing, and you're going to see these words, and I'm sure they'll resonate, and the question is always, how do you do these things? How do you ensure better coordination of requirements development along with S&T strategy development, and how does all that synchronize to inform programs of record? And we're doing that very carefully. I mean, you heard General Cohn talk about we need to get back to the basics, get back to the institutional processes, and some of this is just that, is ensuring that we have the right processes and not being over-bureaucratic about it, but making sure that we're linking these organizations together so that we can make more informed investments and decisions. Synchronizing investments, what does that mean from a headquarters AMC perspective, as the the new element in the headquarters, bringing an RDT&E perspective to the headquarters. How are we making sure when we're talking about these early investments, we're also talking about what it may mean to maintain and sustain these systems in the future? So what you're starting to see within the headquarters and across the Army is integrated discussions across funding streams and across PEG lines to start to address holistically how do we do life cycle management. Analysis, another key piece of where I see us needing to go in the future. AMSA is a part of AMC and is now aligned into the headquarters. And so how are they helping shape those RD&E investments? How are they helping us look at doing some analysis to understand value and trades between different technologies? So what you're seeing is an organization that's becoming much more driven by data, much more driven by decisions based on fact. And then, of course, engagement with you in industry. And how do we provide a focal point for industry to engage with a large organization of AMC across RDECOM, across all of its lab and organizational structures? I'm going to share with you a little bit of a view of how we're proceeding to do that. But needless to say, it's very important that we engage with industry and that we learn from each other, and we can share some opportunities and solutions as we move forward. So created nested planning, creating institutional processes that tie requirements, priorities, and investments together are really critical. We need to be able to see ourselves. So we go to the next slide. Some of the things we're doing. And you already heard it. You heard Ms. Hsu reference this. You heard Mary Miller talk about it. But the changing strategy and what does that mean? So if you read some of the defense planning guidance, and it talks about shifts to the Pacific, it talks about cyber, it talks about weapons of mass destruction. We're going through internal workshops, internal definition of what does that mean, and how do we start posturing our R&D investments to handle that and incorporate that. We talked about this 30-year strategy, and believe me, this is a lot of work. It's been a lot of work, a lot of great people within the government spending time trying to really look at, again, programs of record, what is their modernization strategy, and mapping our technology programs to that strategy. I think it's the first time, at least in my career, where we really had dialogue at the AAE level about technology at that level and that depth to talk about transitions. And the whole point there is if we could roadmap our investments and we could roadmap all of our programs that are technical programs, then we have opportunities for decision making as part of the larger scheme of modernization. It's been a lot of work. We're trying to figure out how to do this. Right now it's brute force people efforts, looking at how do we potentially bring tools that'll help us. But I can say that last week Mary Miller referenced the fact that we had over 12 hours of deep dive reviews over our technology programs, and the kind of questions that Ms. Hsu, the AAE, would ask is, how do we know we're investing in the right thing? How are these technologies enabling the future? Who else is doing it? So these questions are, how well do you know the programs that you have? How well do you are aligned with potentially what industry is doing? And do you know what the critical technology critical pathway is? And can you have a discussion about that? So it's forcing us to be much more open about our programs and our portfolios. We're having dialogues. The PMs and the PEOs are part of that engagement strategy, and we're going to get better at this over time. And the third thing about the future direction, obviously, is this strengthening of partnership. The Army, in order for us to move forward, it's a tight coupling of requirements generation, along with the material development, whether that material development comes from the acquisition side or whether it comes from the S&T side. So we have looked at how do we integrate our, again, our planning. These roadmaps are one good example of that. And how do we create much more real-time engagement with the users, for instance, with TRADOC Arctic, into helping shape those requirements. My experience over my career tells me that it's in that real-time engagement where we can really create efficiencies in terms of shaping requirements and also ensuring that we get those requirements right and get an acquisition strategy right. So we're working pretty hard to couple all those things together and helping us shift our strategy. Next slide. So what are we doing? Some things we're doing, right? Portfolio management processes. I think also Ms. Hsu and others have said if industry has good ways by which they look at a large portfolio, if you have those good ideas, we're open to those kind of discussions because we're defining a portfolio management process. The 30-year strategy is one way to slice and look at that. But if we want to create these kind of efficiencies and have transparency, visibility, have better, understanding of what we're investing in, ability to share our analysis across the community, and ultimately to make sure we're reducing any redundancies across our S&T infrastructure, we have to have certain processes that'll help do that. And so there are a couple things on the horizon. One on the right side, bottom right of the screen, something called a virtual lab. The Secretary of the Army has asked both AMC and ASALT to look at how do you create a virtual lab or enterprise? What is it? How do we create better efficiencies, transparencies, integrated business processes? And so we have been, again, it's a group of people from across the community that have been in this business, are defining what that concept is and how would we go about doing that. But again, it's about, if industry is looking for a certain document, where do you go? How do you find that information to accelerate the things that you have to do in your investment strategy? I know today it's, we know who because we're able to make those kind of calls and do that. And what we're looking at is a new way of doing business, a way that is using some of the tools and capabilities that we know are out there. So again, if you have thoughts on that, we're in the conceptual stages in developing that. The second thing, and Mary Miller mentioned this also, which is the defense business marketplace. It is a place where we're trying to engage with industry a little bit different. Again, it's a place where we should be able to have, if we're going for new procurements or if we're looking for our new technology areas, a place where you can go and engage with us. And so the Defense Innovation Marketplace was created. Army is creating one, and under the Army you're going to see a new business portal that's coming out through AMC. Again, I'm hoping it's a place where we can, if a good idea is out there from industry, it's a place to come into our AMC S&T enterprise through RDECOM and all the other RDECs and efficiently get you back information and find a way to connect the right people and the right capabilities together. So it's really about synchronizing all of these different activities, and these are some of the things that we're doing. Next slide. Again, you saw this. This is the hard part about going last, is many of these things have already been, but I'll probably get all the questions, right? So, but Army S&T challenges, and you see them. And it's always been a challenge, and one of the things is coming from the ground vehicle community, I'm learning it's the same thing on the air, and I'm learning it's the same thing on the soldier. It's all about the balance between protection and mobility, whether that mobility means ground mobility, soldier walking mobility, or some kind of air mobility. Had the opportunity to have a meeting where General O'Dare was present, and that was his number one concern. His number one concern was that we've traded off, for good reasons, for protection, our ability, our mobility. And so these are some of the things that we're doing and the challenges that we have in S&T. Many of them were highlighted. I think some of the ones that are pretty interesting have to do with what we're doing in terms of the WMN program, trying to build the right instrumentation and simulations so that we can actually understand a brain injury and that we can then use those tools in our design and development of our systems, all the way to some of the things that we're doing in the C3I portfolio. And this is just a sample of some of the portfolio, a lot of key technologies, but the challenge for us is, again, as we go through this process of looking at all of our investments, is ensuring we're investing in the right things. And that 30-year strategy is our first glimpse at doing that. Next slide. So looking in the future, you know, we all keep saying the same thing of, you know, strategic thinking, innovation. You know, we want to be able to get to that, you know, that one person who's tinkering around in his father's lab, right? And how does that person then engage with the Army? And hopefully through some of the mechanisms we put in place, we'll have that kind of engagement. Synchronization, again, the ability for us to look across our S&T programs to its programs of record and how that all ties with TRADOC is pretty critical. And we're doing that, and we're looking at some of these kind of tools to help us move forward. So with that, I'm open to some questions. We could go to the last slide. Okay, I get one question. Yeah, it's a good question. I think the question was asked almost to every speaker, which is how does sequestration and continuing resolution impact AMC? And how do you plan 30 years without a 13 budget? I told you I was going to get all the hard questions, almost being last. I can say that obviously it's impacting us in the sense that we're really trying to look at all the pieces of our portfolio and making sure that we're investing in the right things we're investing. We're doing a lot of planning to make sure we understand those impacts. I think, you know, it was highlighted in the sense on the S&T side, where you're going to see a lot of the impacts is where you have single investigator academic investments going on, or programs, grants and things like that, where there's total labor costs. So those are the kind of S&T impacts, and we're just working through them. And again, our ability to see ourselves, our ability to better prioritize and to ensure we're getting our priorities right is really important. Now, the good news is we're not doing it in a vacuum. I think you've heard from every speaker. We're all saying the same thing coming from different organizations. It's because we've been working on this together for quite some time. So with that, thank you very much. I'll be here at least for today and a part of tomorrow, and look forward to any questions and engaging with industry. And thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Bohanec. It's a challenging environment, and especially when you throw in the cyber. Are you also responsible for cyber research and development related to that? Protection as well as forensics and all that stuff? But then who? Within AMC under communications. That's real growth area, unfortunately, or fortunately, or whatever. Okay, thanks a lot, Dr. Bohanec. Appreciate it. I'm honored now to introduce our last speaker of the day,